friends. Welcome back to the Skinny on Wall Street with Kristen and Jen. This is Kristen.
I'm Jen.
And this is our second weekly podcast episode where we give you the skinny on anything going on in the markets or anything that we happen to have on our mind. And so today we're going to be a little heavier on some of the lifestyle topics, but we are going to get into the ECB cutting rates. We'll have a quick discussion about just GameStop and the continued saga that ensues. And then we want to talk a little bit about pretty privilege. And we had a question on our Instagram that came up asking about when you feel that you're not being taken seriously because your body size is too small. And so we had a whole bunch of things we wanted to say about that. So quick disclaimer, I feel like the last, 36 hours, my brain has stopped working. So if I am a little slow today, I apologize. And yesterday I was telling Jen, I was like, I'm so tired. So she was like, are you pregnant? I was like, absolutely not.
That's what I always assume with you.
No, but it's really cool. Actually, have you guys heard of the Aura Ring? I'm obsessed with this thing.
A lot of people I know are obsessed with it.
So it's really cool. What it does is one of the things is it will track your steps, tracks a whole bunch of stuff, your sleep, but also tracks your temperature. And so it can essentially tell you if you're like cycling healthily, which is like one of the fifth vital signs for a woman. And so I sent Jen a screenshot. I was like, nope, low temperatures, like not pregnant. Absolutely not. But to start off, what do we begin with?
Mean, the ECB, it's not a groundbreaking story, but the ECB did ease by 25 basis points. Mm-hmm. They had been on hold for, I believe, 9 months, and they're talking about signs of inflation moderating. So it's just another data point when we think about where central banks are on a global cycle. Again, with the Fed currently on hold in the US, it's very rare for a central bank to be going in the opposite direction of its closest peers around the world. And so now many of the developed countries around the world are in easing mode. So it is likely that the Fed follows suit, as we've seen signs of inflation moderating here, as we've seen signs that the jobs reports are maybe softening a little bit. That's something that is certainly projected to happen around the end of the year by the markets right now. Not a major easing cycle, but that it would kick something off. So that's just what we're watching today in the markets.
I saw that the chance of a rate cut, the expectation has increased to like 60% or something for September. But when they're talking about like the US versus other countries, because of how our housing system works, like the way that increasing rates impacts basically like people in the US is so much different, because in the US, if you had gotten a 30-year rate, you might have locked in like 2% way back in whatever it was, 2020. Mm-hmm. And so raising rates is not really affecting you. You're sitting pretty. If anything, it's helping you because you're getting higher returns in your savings account or whatever. But in other countries, in some cases, like rates are floating. So like when the
most mortgages, first of all, most mortgages are not refinanceable with no prepayment penalty in other countries. So that's a huge differentiating factor between the US. The US mortgage market does not look like any other housing market around the world. It is a totally different structure where you can lock in a 30-year fixed mortgage rate, like you said, Kristen, and where you can refinance with no pre-penalty. That is simply not the case in the majority of the developed world. And it makes our housing market and the dynamics of how the Fed's central bank policy impacts, like you said, the individual consumer much different than it does around the world. The transmission mechanism is different.
Yeah. So anyway, it's just sort of, it's interesting that like in another country, it's like you raise rates and it makes, it actually has the effect of what you hoped. Whereas in the US, it's like for half of the population, or however many people have fixed rate mortgages locked in, it has the opposite effect. So it's just interesting, as you're in this like global economy. So the other kind of interesting things that have happened in the last week is, this is just more of like a fun fact. So NVIDIA passed Apple in size, in market cap. So it's now a $3 trillion company, which is crazy. The other thing we wanted to talk about is GameStop is back again for like the third time. It was announced, a Roaring Kitty, that like dude who the GameStop movie was about, he shared that he had $100 million investment, or it was more than $100 million. And again, it's worth even more. I think it's like worth almost probably $500 million at this point. And it's a combination of options and stock. But he made that public. And then obviously as a result, a whole bunch of people started to dive in and buy. And so Morgan Stanley, because I guess he's been investing on E-Trade, which is owned by Morgan Stanley. And there was talk of like, are they going to kick him off the platform for market manipulation?
Oh.
And they ultimately, I don't think, I mean, this is the speculation. Like, I don't think Morgan Stanley wants to get a whole bunch of like angry Redditors against them. So I don't think they're going to kick him off. I do think they want potentially for the SEC to step in. So somebody else is responsible. If
somebody else plays the bad guy.
Yeah. But it's, it's so interesting because it's one of these things where I think if you kind of get into like, is it quote unquote fair that, or does it seem like this should be legal that he can just, he knows he's going to post this. He knows it's going to cause the share price to go up and he knows he's basically minting money. And it's like, is that fair? And it's hard because we live in a world where, I mean, politicians are allowed to like trade with inside information. So, if you're some random person who's sitting there like, well, they get to do it. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. But at the same time, as the spouses of people that work at banks and at hedge funds, we couldn't do fucking jack shit. So it's like, I don't know. There's like different rules for everyone. And if you actually were an advisor
or Elon,
you could not do
remember the whole thing around when he was going to buy Twitter and he was tweeting about, I mean, like that's, very gray area. And I agree with you. It does feel like there's different rules for different
rules. Yeah. I mean, again, if you're a banker and you now are advising a company, you get locked into a really shitty trade.
Right.
And you're stuck. And I do think, again, it's like there's different rules for different people. And anyway, it does feel like there's something that does seem sketch, that it's like he knows if he says this thing, but it's sort of like a cult leader, right? You're going to say this thing, the people are going to pile into it. You can make money off of it. I mean, I don't know, like it's not his fault that people just blindly follow what he does. But anyway.
I kind of no view on that other than I cannot believe people are still doing this and talking about it.
Yeah. But again, the thing is like ultimately the money that he makes is from the people that are buying in. Like, that's where all the money is coming from. It's like he has however much it is. It's like, that's your money.
Why are you signing up for this? I don't understand. Yeah. There's no story about like, sticking it to the man anymore, right? Yeah, exactly. There's no big strategic position that you're trying to unravel. There was a very different conversation during the first GameStop bubble back in the day than there is now. Now it's just, I literally walked by a GameStop at the local shopping center on my way to the toy store last weekend. It's shuttered up. Like it's totally closed. Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just wild. But the last thing we wanted to talk about was we got a question. Let me find the exact prompt. So by the way, if you guys are not following us right now on Instagram, we try to do a Ask Me Anything every weekend. And so if you have questions, we try to answer as many as we can.
We typically get to about 25 or 30 questions in a weekend. To give you context, we probably get about 3,000 every weekend or more. Yeah. So if we haven't answered your question, just keep asking.
Just keep asking.
Asking. We'll get to it. We promise.
So someone asked, well, by the way, the same person also said, how often do you guys get asked if you are related? You look like twins, which I thought was hilarious. But then she went on to say, loved your episode on body image on Wall Street, wondering about the other side of it, AKA being too thin instead of too quote unquote large. Some people are naturally very skinny, but people criticize this as not looking professional. I try to dress to hide my size, but I can't help but having a very petite frame and being naturally small and short. It makes it tough to look like a capable professional adult at work. Any tips on how being a too small size can affect your image at work and how to combat that, especially as a woman, aside from working with a dietitian to gain a healthy weight? And this was I thought an interesting question and something that was too difficult to answer in like one frame
story slide.
Even a 3-frame story slide. So if you haven't listened to our podcast episode, we did the one that she was referencing. It was really on like Ozempic and body image on Wall Street. And in the episode, Jen and I shared our history. I never had a diagnosed eating disorder, but like I probably did.
One. Yeah.
I basically had one. Yeah. And Jen was just a really thin kid growing up. And then as you tell it, you're like, and then one day it flipped. Now, yeah. And then and by the way, you still are really fucking thin, but it's like, at that point, it was like
yo-yoed. My weight has gone up and down for years. And I always have devoted way too much mental energy to how much I weigh, what am I eating, blah, blah, blah. How do my clothes fit? What size am I? I hate it.
Yeah. Well, no. And so it's one of these things where I do think that if anyone is making comments about your body size, or if you feel uncomfortable about yourself because of your body size, like that is always a problem. We do live in a world where being too thin is not, I think, shamed the way that being larger is.
I
And in
agree.
fact, when I was, again, quote unquote, too thin myself and people would make comments, I took it as a compliment. I was like,
Oh, yeah.
oh, I'm
It
doing
used to be
something
like,
right.
God, I really hope someone will come up to me and say, are you okay?
Yeah.
Have you been eating enough?
Yeah.
That, which is so
Yeah.
wild that you would
Which
like
is wild. Yeah.
strive to have people legitimately concerned for your health.
Yeah. And with that said, like there definitely are situations where, again, you can be made fun of. And I've told you this, Jen, before. So my brother was a swimmer growing up, and he was so skinny as a kid, and he was also short, which is wild because he's like 6'5" now. But he would get, for swimming, they would have to shave their head, and people would make comments to him and say like, "You look like you are a cancer patient," which is, by the way, horrible because like if he actually did have cancer, like how fucked up is that to say that to someone?
Ridiculous.
They would make fun of him for being too small. And I also, when I was in college, I was friends with a girl who had been struggling with anorexia for, I think, since she was 9. And she logically knew that it was damaging her health. She was literally getting a master's of public health. And, but again, so people would talk about it and they'd be like, why won't she eat? And I remember she even said to me once, and again, I was too thin, but I was still much larger than she was at the time. She's like, you have a perfect body. And I was like, so eat. But that's the thing, right? I think that a lot of times people believe you have more control than you do. And even in a case where like, technically, does she have control? Yes. But also no, because like there is so much that goes into recovering from an eating disorder. Or if you are someone who is naturally large, or you are larger for other reasons, like it's not as simple as just, oh, do this simple quick fix and it's going to make everything better.
Eat a cheeseburger.
Eat a cheeseburger. Like if it only it was that easy. And for a lot of people, it's not. And by the way, this girl,
I do love a cheeseburger.
yeah. Well, no, I was going to say, I mean, this girl ultimately passed away when she was 25. So I think that like people are so focused on the again, health consequences of being overweight or obesity epidemic. Everyone talks about that. And no one talks about the real effects of being too thin and having eating disorders, because it could be deadly. So the reason that I'm bringing all this up is that because of that last question that said specifically, aside from getting a dietitian to try to gain healthy weight, if you are at a body size that is below what your body would probably want to be, I would, again, do anything in your power to get out of, if you are struggling with an eating disorder, disordered eating, like do everything you can to try to fight out of that. Because again, I know a lot of people who have struggled and ultimately recovered. I didn't get a cycle for 15, 16, 17 years because I was under eating and over exercising so much. So people do recover and like you can get over that. So I just want to make that point that if that is where you're coming from, do everything in your power to get out of that hell, because it is hell. But if that is your body size, then fuck everybody else and find what you can do to make yourself feel confident. It's like I said today, I felt like shit. So I was like, I need to put on makeup so that I feel a little less shitty, because finding clothes that flatter yourself, finding the makeup that you like, my hairstyle, whatever it is, like just make yourself feel the most confident.
I think this is touching on something that is such a reality, especially in the culture of high finance, where, and more so on the trading floor probably than in the investment banking world, where you aren't constantly in such a social environment all the time. But in these hyper social environments, if there is anything about you that is comment worthy, the odds are that somebody's going to make a comment on it. And I'm not saying that's okay. I'm just saying that's the reality of these places. Yeah. And it's funny right now, as we're having this conversation, I'm makeup free in my glasses. And I wanted to talk about this today because after we get off the phone, I'm literally going and getting laser vision surgery to correct my vision. I have been self-conscious about my vision and the corrective steps I've had to take for it for almost 33 years now, which is crazy. I have woken up every single day and thought about like, oh, I mean, when my husband and I first started dating, I was like, you'll never see me in glasses. It was like that scene in Bridesmaids where Kristen Wiig leaps out of bed and goes and puts on a full face of makeup, right? I used to like wake up early, go put in my contacts, like sneak back in. I mean, ridiculous. And now listen, we've been married for 11 years. God love him. He has seen me in my glasses. Okay. Let's be real. That charade did not last long, but I have put myself through suffering really in terms of, again, my prescription is like -8 million. I've got astigmatism up the wazoo. And I would be uncomfortable staring at screens all day wearing contacts, but I wanted that incremental better treatment for being more conventionally attractive, even though why, right? I wasn't seeking, I was already married woman, engaged, whatever. I wasn't seeking a mate while I was on the trading floor, although I did happen to meet my husband on the trading floor, so joke's on me. But but I was why, right? And I started thinking about this. And, we've heard the term pretty privilege or beauty premium, or my favorite, which is Barbie bias.
I've never heard that.
And there is a really well-cited study. It's kind of like the most oft referenced one. And I have no idea about the actual mechanics behind the study, that people who are deemed attractive by their peers statistically get paid something on the order of 10 to 15% more than their peers who are deemed less attractive, whatever that means. Pretty privilege is a very real thing, especially in the world of high finance. And I'm not saying that short, petite people are not pretty or attractive or whatever, but I think what that follower was communicating to us is she is getting teased or whatever about her appearance. And if you look different on the trading floor, generally speaking, and again, it happens as well in investment banking, it happens in finance, there is a culture of people saying things and talking about it and making jokes that, in as sensitive a world as we have built these days, where everyone tries to protect everyone's feelings, I still think that those things exist. I do think it's part of normal human communication, right? To make what may feel like affectionate nicknames for people.
Well, I was going to say, I think people are also sometimes just like really awkward. Like, and sometimes we'll say things because like they're uncomfortable and it's the first thing that comes out of their mouth and they haven't actually thought through what it is that they're saying. Like sometimes people are just fucking dumb. And I think that happens a lot more than you'd think. But to your point, people they want to have ways to try to show that they're affectionate. Or maybe they're just malicious and like not a good person.
Yeah, people might be shitty as well. Like that's entirely possible.
But I also think like there's definitely cases where people like that's almost like how they think that they're relating to you. And if that's not the case,
something you must be like really eager to joke around about is how petite you are. And it's like, no, actually that's not, but thanks for trying.
I was going to say what's funny is that I remember when I was growing up, I was always really tall. I was the youngest in my class and also a full head taller than everyone. And I was so self-conscious about it that I would like hunch down all the time. And like my posture sucks now because I always would do that. Because again, I saw like the shorter girls in our class, like these petite, and I was like, they're so cool. And the people would comment how cute they were. And I was like, I want to be like them,
I remember this so well. Yes.
Yeah. And then when I got older, I wanted to be tall and I was actually annoyed that I got like gypped. My mom's 5'10" and I stopped growing at like 5'8 3/4. Now I round up to 5'9", but still I'm like, how come I didn't get to my mom's height, And so I think that with so many things, part of it is how you embody whatever it is. Like if you are, whatever size you are, if you are able to feel confident about it, again, I'm assuming that there is no other health issue going on. So if your natural body size is smaller, petiter, and that's just you, if you can own it and turn it into an asset, like so much of everything is about how you present and the confidence that you exude. So if you are able to own being shorter, smaller, petiter, like that's awesome. What was that?
Yes. No, I totally agree. Whatever makes you different in a dream world, that's what you lean into and you quote unquote own it. And it becomes your calling card rather than the thing that you feel you have to hide or compensate for. That's the dream world. I think that it's really easy to be like, go do it. Be empowered. And I think it's a very different thing when you feel like you're not being taken seriously when you're in a professional setting because how other people view how you look. You have to somehow become, I'm the short, sassy, tiny queen who's going to go own this thing, whatever it is. I don't speak empowerment very well. Sorry guys. It doesn't work.
No, the other thing that this woman thinks it hurts her is because it makes her look young. And that is a real thing on Wall Street. It's one of the few industries where I actually think it's almost like having the gray hair actually does help and looking a little bit older does help. And I mean, I love my husband, literally just had his 40th birthday, but he has looked 40 since he was 25. And that has been a huge asset for him.
Yeah.
Like he looks exactly the same. He's just finally
Yeah.
grown into his age.
Mhm.
Whereas I remember when I started teaching, the staffer said to me, I can't put you in front of large clients, the large banks, because you look younger than everybody else. And
Mhm.
so looking quote unquote too young in this industry can actually hurt you. And again, this is something unfortunately, like there's just not really much you can do about this. The irony is that we're going to have a conversation, which I think is coming out in a couple weeks, with someone who's in the tech world, where basically if you look like you're 12, it's a huge asset. And
Right.
if you are 35, you're geriatric. So it's
Mhm.
funny how in different industries, certain characteristics can be a huge asset or a huge liability. And it totally varies.
But it's also like, don't look too young, but also get Botox. Like,
yeah.
You know, so you have to walk this knife's edge, right?
Yeah.
Where, God forbid, you look your age at any given age.
Right.
When you're young, you're supposed to look more mature. And when you're more mature, you're supposed to look younger. And again, this is nothing new. This is something that I think we've been lamenting for decades. But just in response to this specific question, I think your advice is spot on, Kristen, that assuming everything's healthy, if you can find a way to turn what makes you unique into your asset, that can be so powerful.
Yeah.
You know, we interviewed Anthony Scaramucci, right? I think he's made a whole career out of embodying and embracing and leaning into what makes him different.
Fired. Getting fired. No. Like seriously. He took the thing that was like the probably most embarrassing time of his entire life.
Yes.
And is trying to own it and turn it into something that helps him. And I feel like it works.
It's working. It's working great for him. He's on a rocket ship to the moon. So, be Anthony, be more like Anthony Scaramucci, I guess is the moral of the story.
It's the moral, seriously. But yeah, I mean, everyone has insecurities, but sometimes actually being different in whatever way that is, if you can use it to your advantage, go for it. And, yeah.
Awesome. Well, listen, wish me luck at this laser surgery. I'm a little bit nervous.
Well, no, you talked to me and told me that like, it's all good. I think I was more nervous about it than you were. When you told me yesterday, I was like, what? And you were like, no, these are the side effects. It's all good. Like nothing bad will happen.
So, but yeah, I was kind of talking to you, expecting you to be like, yeah, this sounds like a good idea. Like, damn it, woman, now you're
Well, no, it does sound like a great idea. I'm actually really excited for you. It sounds like an amazing idea.
I want the excitement.
Yeah. I am full on like 100%. This is like, you should absolutely do this and 1,000%. I didn't know what the recovery looked like. And I was also like, I didn't know what the risks were. So in my head, I'm like, if there's a risk of blind, like what? Like you're doing it. So that was why.
But Jen, we need to record the course. So
and that too.
Could you just hold off
well, because you had actually said, well, that's true. You had said a while ago, you were like, I'm going to do it after the course is done. So I was like, okay. So when you were like, I'm getting it tomorrow. And I was like, well, how long is the recovery for? Like, what are the chances that something bad could happen? And you were like, no, it's 24 hours recovery. And like, there's no chance. It's like, okay. Like,
hopefully this time tomorrow
it'll be amazing.
I'm back up and running and doing all the things.
Yay. Well, thank you guys so much for letting us do this. And this weekend we will have our bankers versus lawyers episode.
Woo!
For anyone who has been waiting on the edge of your seats for us to interview some lawyers, we're going to have that conversation out. It's a really, really, really fun one, especially in light of like Suits being the number one show.
Yeah. So, this is a must listen for everybody. Absolutely.
Yes.
All right, guys, talk to you soon.
Bye.